Well, the Coyotes took their 2 losses to the Los Angeles Kings to heart and absolutely stomped on the Chicago Blackhawks at home at the Mullett. We'll talk about that on today's Locked On Coyotes alongside Locked On Blackhawks.
You're Locked On Coyotes, your daily podcast on the Arizona Coyotes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the show, everybody. This is Locked On Coyotes, your number one daily podcast on the Arizona Coyotes. It's a crossover episode alongside Locked On Blackhawks. I'm your host, Robyn Leano, alongside host of Locked On Blackhawks, Jack Bushman. Matthew Jacobson, my co-host, is off tonight. He is actually working at the Mullett tonight, so I decided to give him the night off. So just Jack and I can talk about this game as the Arizona Coyotes take the Chicago Blackhawks 8-1, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, it got out of hand there in a heartbeat because the Blackhawks actually started out this game on a pretty good note, Robyn. Connor Bedard kicks off the scoring in the opening 30 seconds. A beautiful setup as well by their first selection in the 2022 NHL draft and defenseman Kevin Korchinski. And then I thought they were, building off that fairly well, cycling the puck in the offensive zone. Particularly the top 6 forward lines seemed to be having their way with the Coyotes, but once they found the back of the net, it felt like the Blackhawks just kind of fell into panic mode. I don't know what went over them, but to go and give up 8 unanswered goals the way that they did was certainly disappointing, especially coming off a very big comeback win over the Vegas Golden Knights in their game prior, where they really showed a lot of heart and tenacity and felt like they didn't play that style at all this evening and were way too soft defensively, giving up odd man rushes and too many breakdowns in front of the net. And it was just their worst defensive performance of the season. And kind of unfortunate because early on, like I mentioned, I thought they got off to a good start, but things got out of hand real quick.
It's interesting because going back to the preview episode I had alongside my co-host Matthew is like, Matthew actually was going to go with the the curb stomping route, and so it was like, oh yeah, it's going to be a complete route for the Coyotes. I was going to give the Blackhawks a little bit more credit. I was like, look, the Blackhawks, they're as you mentioned, I was like, yeah, they've got things going for them a little bit in the last couple games. Maybe the Coyotes' confidence is down. It's going to be a little bit of a closer game. I still predicted a win for the Coyotes, but I sure didn't expect a defensive performance from the Blackhawks in that capacity at all.
Yeah, and considering, and this isn't a knock on the Coyotes by any means, but the schedule that the Blackhawks had leading up to this game, I mean, they had already faced the defending Stanley Cup champion Golden Knights twice. They had faced the Boston Bruins twice as well, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Colorado Avalanche, and yeah, they got shut out in a couple of those games and lost 3 or 4-0, but even going into the third period or midway through the game, it seemed like things were still a little bit competitive. And in this one, you could just see once it got to 4-1 early on in that second period, 5-1 thereafter, I mean, the tires just completely fell off and wound up being the Blackhawks' worst loss of the season. I didn't expect it whatsoever either, but I guess that's what happens when you go in and maybe underestimate a team a little bit. And Blackhawks defenseman Seth Jones and forward Nick Foligno both spoke about that after the game, saying they think that's what happened a little bit. And the Blackhawks just aren't in a position where they could do that, especially on the road, going on a trip where so far this year they've mostly been on the road. So they can't afford to have efforts like that with a very young lineup. So it was pretty disappointing that it wound up going that way, and it really just happened and spiraled, and it seemed like they couldn't do anything to stop it.
And I feel like one thing too is like if you were to take a look at the stat sheet, take the score completely out of it. If you were just to take a look at the rest of the stats, shots on goal, face-off wins, hits, everything like that, it looks like it's a pretty even game, right? Just things just dominoed one after another. It just went in favor of the Coyotes and not against Chicago.
Yeah, there were a couple of particular bounces that wound up behind Arvid Soderblom. One of those being the hat trick for, I'm blanking on the name right now.
Michael Carcone.
Yeah, Michael Carcone, which we thought was going to be Logan Cooley's first NHL goal there for a second, but that was a whole walkie bounce. Arizona also had a goal go in that looked like was kicking motion, but it wasn't. It was just a bounce off the skate. So just a couple of things like that. And then a couple breakdowns defensively for the Blackhawks where they gave up really good looks. And yeah, it just wound up being one of those where the stats maybe got padded a little bit worse than it was. But those things happen every now and again. It's not fun when it does, but hopefully this is one that this Blackhawks team is going to be able to flush, and they're going to need to, because things aren't going to get any easier in terms of their schedule moving forward.
Yeah. And I'm sure that's maybe something like, every now and then you might expect a game like this. The Chicago Blackhawks, are at a point in their rebuild in which that these games like this happen, right?
And still thinking about what they have on their blue line, Robyn, even with Alex Vlasic, who is considered a rookie this season as well, they had to call up Isaac Phillips from the Rockford Ice Hogs, their minor league affiliate. And this was his first game of the season. He took a couple of penalties, wasn't really looking all that comfortable. And then Kevin Korchinski still getting his feet wet in his 9th NHL game, So they're still very young and inexperienced. They're basically their whole left side of the blue line is rookies. So yeah, nights like this are going to happen, but it's all about learning from it. That's really the name of the game this season, is figuring out, what these young players need to do to become comfortable and make that step to become everyday NHLers and go through that grind of a regular season and learn how to bounce back from it along the way. The expectations aren't crazy high for this Blackhawks team, and it would be foolish to think nights like this are just never going to happen. There's still going to be bumps in the road, but it's all about how they respond from it and not allowing it to snowball and turn into more outcomes like this in the future.
Absolutely. Is there anything else that you wanted on the Blackhawks side you want to highlight before we flip things over and talk about the Coyotes a little bit?
Yeah, I do think, at least for the Blackhawks side of things, it was a night that the top line can maybe build off a little bit. I know the final score isn't going to be indicative of that, but Connor Bedard, I thought, had some good shifts, and I thought got good support again from Nick Foligno and Philip Kurashev, two guys who I thought were some of the better looking Blackhawks players on the ice this evening. And that's kind of one thing that's been missing so far in the early going that we'll probably touch on, I'm sure, a little bit more throughout this episode when we get into Connor Bedard and Logan Cooley. But it's felt like Connor Bedard has had to do a lot himself here in the early going, with Taylor Hall out due to an injury right now. And it's been really key these last couple of games to see him getting some help alongside him and also establishing some chemistry with a guy like Nick Foligno, who's built a really good relationship with Bedard off of the ice as well. And Philip Kurashev looked good in his third game back from injury as well. So not many positive takeaways for the Blackhawks from this one, Robyn, but I did think that top line, at least at times, moved the puck well and created some good looks, and Bedard wound up cashing in for his 4th goal of the season.
Well, there you have it. Well, we're going to talk about, continue talking about this Arizona Coyotes versus Chicago Blackhawks. As once again, Arizona takes the win over Chicago 8-1. We're going to flip and talk about the Coyotes coming up. But first, a quick word from our sponsors on today's show.
Yeah, I got to talk to you all about Game Time. You all should not have to worry when you're buying tickets to the next big event. And Game Time is the fast and easy way to purchase all of your tickets to the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. And I personally have used Game Time, Robyn, since I was way back in high school for probably close to a decade now, when I was just 17 or 18 years old going to Blackhawks games or going to Chicago Cubs games. And it's always been the easiest way for me to purchase all of my tickets. I love how they send me images of my seats, so I know exactly what I'm getting before I buy the tickets. And they get to my account exactly when I want them to. Never any delays. I highly recommend you all go and check out the Game Time app right now. You can also get $20 off on your first purchase when you use the code LOCKEDONNHL. Again, get $20 off to come see Connor Bedard at the United Center or Logan Cooley at Mullett Arena by using the code LOCKEDONNHL when you download the Game Time app right now. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Game Time.
Well, we want to thank everyone once again for making Locked On Coyotes and Locked On Blackhawks your first listen every day. Also, as a quick reminder, you can listen to all the Coyotes and Blackhawks hometown broadcasts on the SiriusXM app. All you got to do is just download the SXM app and just search up Coyotes or Blackhawks, and you'll be able to get them on there. Also, our podcasts, you can also find them there as well. But let's flip the script, Jack. Let's talk about the Coyotes and some of the things that they've got going in this game, because there's a lot to unpack if you are looking on the Coyotes side of things. I want to address the first one, the lacking bit, I would say, before we talk about what went right. And I saw on your keys before the game that one of the is to shut down Nick Schmaltz and Clayton Keller. Both those players were completely off the score sheet in this 8-1 win for the Coyotes. So I guess that part worked for them, but the rest of the committee just stepped up.
Yeah, when doing some research on the Arizona Coyotes before going into this matchup, I noticed in their 3 wins, Nick Schmaltz and Clayton Keller had been paramount to that. 10 points combined in those 3 games as opposed to just 6 points combined in the 4 losses. And if you went and checked the box score after this game and you see those 2 out of the stat sheet, you probably would have liked the Blackhawks' chances of coming away with a victory. But obviously, we know that wasn't the case. We saw multiple point efforts from guys like Alexander Kerfoot. Jack McBain had an absolutely dazzling goal late there with a give and go from Alex Kerfoot to just walk through the Blackhawks defenders. Carcone obviously had a hat trick as well. Boyd wound up with 2 points. It felt like everyone on the Coyotes wound up putting up a point except for Keller and Schmaltz. But I did want to ask you not only about the performance from some of those players tonight and who in particular stood out to you, but also what have you thought of kind of this supporting cast out of the Arizona Coyotes through their first 8 games of the regular season now? Is this something that, you know, you've seen coming? Is this a kind of a coming out party for them? What are your thoughts on that?
I feel like it's just like a night and day, just like sigh of relief over the last couple of years for the Coyotes, because the supporting cast in the previous couple of years was designed for tanking. It was designed for like, yeah, we know this team is not going to be any good, but they picked up all the right pieces, picking up Sean Durzi, picking up Alex Kerfoot, picking up Matt Dumba, and so a lot of these players, like they were integral to showing that this team was ready to compete. And I mentioned that all throughout the offseason. And a game like tonight was just proof of that. Michael Carcone surely was no surprise to me at all, because those that have listened to me every day and have been following my content over the last several years know that I've covered the Coyotes for the last covered the Roadrunners, the Tucson Roadrunners, the minor league team, for like 7 years. Michael Carcone, in the last few years of that, was a huge integral part of that, including last season being the AHL's leading scorer. So it surely was no surprise to see him do something like this, but it was his first hat trick in the NHL, which I think was absolutely awesome to see. And as you mentioned earlier in the show, that third goal, it looked like it could have gone to Logan Cooley, but heck, you know, it's either Logan Cooley's first goal or Michael Carcone's first hat trick. Either way, I couldn't complain.
Yeah, just a special night, obviously, whenever something like that occurs, and you'll take it however you get it. And then for this Coyotes defense, one thing I noticed as well coming into this game, Robyn, was their ability to kind of pitch in offensively. Sean Durzi now has 4 goals this season, I believe, through their opening 8 games. Has that been a big part for the Coyotes' success as well, the defense being able to chip in?
Oh, absolutely. I was worried for a while, like what kind of defense we'd be looking at after Gostisbehere being gone from last season, and as well as Jacob Chikrin. A lot of, you know, pretty integral parts of the Coyotes defense. In the previous couple years, I was like, all right, this defense looks pretty depleted. And like I mentioned, picking up Durzi and picking up Dumba were huge. And as it shows, Durzi, as you said with his stat line, like he's been huge. I mean, heck, there's a reason I have him on my fantasy team, because he's been that integral. I think it's like I said, it's been like night and day. It's been like a huge breath of fresh air having a guy like Durzi on the team.
So what has been the other keys to the Coyotes getting off to this 4-4-0 start? Because looking at their schedule, they have a win over the New Jersey Devils. They've also picked up wins over the St. Louis Blues, now this Blackhawks team. And even in the games that they've lost, it's been to some of the better teams out of the gate in the entire NHL, the New York Rangers, Islanders, the Kings. What have been the keys for for the Arizona Coyotes to get to this point, and kind of what do you think they need to build on to continue to keep racking up points here in the early get-go?
I think it's just, working on the chemistry of the players, as well as kind of like having that. I have a feeling that they have that kind of misfit attitude where they kind of like, it's a team that everyone still tries to write off, and they just won't let that happen. Despite that, because I think everyone was made fun of the Coyotes when they mentioned, I forgot who mentioned. I think it was the general manager, Bill Armstrong, was like, yeah, we're trying to be more competitive this year. All this, and I think some like national media or some other like hockey Twitter took that as they're going all out or they're going to win now mode. Like, that's not what they're meaning. They're just meaning that they're going to be a competitive team. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Even in the games that they've lost, they still showed competitiveness. Yes, I know the two losses to the Los Angeles Kings were collapses that shouldn't have been. But there were moments in those games in which they showed that competitiveness. They didn't play a full 60-minute game. That's on them. But the wins that they've had have been all that impressive.
So what are kind of the expectations from here? It felt like going into this year, the top of the division was pretty clear-cut in the Colorado Avalanche and the Dallas Stars, but the rest of it felt up for grabs. And there were some people out there saying maybe this Arizona Coyotes bunch is the sleeper, maybe not only of the Central Division, but of the Western Conference. What are your thoughts on that? And what are your personal expectations going forward?
Yeah, so Matt and I have been pretty consistent on our viewpoints that the Coyotes they're kind of a team that will probably flirt with the playoff spot. They'll probably spend like maybe a month or maybe even 2 months in barely a playoff spot. I feel like they are a bubble team at this point where like they could surprise and very well make that second wild card spot. But like they're going to be like floating right around that area where it's going to be like maybe like 5th or 6th in the Central Division. They're still going to surprise a lot of people. I do feel like they are a lot better team than anyone else takes them out to be.
Hey, and who knows where that can take them if they keep finding a way to put themselves in games. Crazy things happen in this sport, and I think there are far crazier things that could happen than the Arizona Coyotes getting in the playoffs.
Oh, absolutely. I want to, but before we kind of talk about a little bit about Cooley and Bedard, though, I want to ask you something, and I showed it here on this on the little sidebar here. But have you ever seen a game in which there were 2 Gordie Howe hat tricks in one game?
No, actually never. And I'll tell you what, Robyn, not only does that astonish me, but the fact that Jarred Tinordi was trying to get in a fight when the game was 7-1 actually blew my mind. Like a little late there, bud. There were a couple of things that were a little late in this one. Pulling Arvid Soderblom when the game's 6-1, it's like that probably could have happened an hour ago, but sure, it is what it is. And then Jarred Tinordi that was a shaking my head type of moment to see that fight actually happened at that point in the game. But no, that is probably a feat that should be Googled or looked around on the sports world. Do you know by chance, is it the first one?
So it is the first time. Here's an interesting thing. So the 2 players that got it for the Coyotes are Liam O'Brien and Jack McBain. The last time in at least the Coyotes organization, Coyotes/Jets 1.0, that 2 Gordie Howe hat tricks happened the same game was Peter Taglianetti and Andrew McBain, Jack McBain's dad, February 3rd of 1988.
Wow. It was almost meant to be, wasn't it?
I would like the moment the Scripps Sports TV broadcast put that up from the Coyotes outside. I was like, I'm sorry, what? That is absolutely amazing. That's the last time it happened.
Yeah, that's stunning. Wow. History in the desert this evening, I guess.
again, like, you've seen stuff like that. Again, it's pretty fun. It was a pretty fun game.
That's the bow on top of just the weirdness that was this game between the Blackhawks and the Coyotes, Robyn.
Absolutely. Well, what we're going to do is coming up after the break, we're going to talk about what I'm pretty sure a lot of people wanted to hear about. Talking about Logan Cooley versus Connor Bedard. We'll get to that right after this. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, Jack, the moment everyone's been waiting for on this. Logan Cooley versus Connor Bedard. It's interesting because Cooley was the 3rd overall pick in 2022, and we're talking about versus the first overall pick in 23 with Bedard. But for some reason, this has been a lot more hyped, mainly because I think everyone's saying, without a doubt, Cooley was the best draft pick out of the last year's draft. So the hype was real.
Yeah, I mean, the 2022 draft was a weird one in and alone of itself with everything that happened with Shane Wright. But after seeing what Logan Cooley did in his freshman campaign with the University of Minnesota, I think the Arizona Coyotes feel good about who they selected at number 3. And obviously wound up with an assist tonight, did not get credited with that goal and still looking for that first NHL tally. But Robyn, I feel like you got to be happy with, 6 assists now for Cooley through his first 8 NHL games. Can you kind of talk to me about what you've liked about his game, how you thought he's blended, and what you think he needs to work on still a little bit?
Yeah, I really just like that Logan Cooley is able to be everywhere. You can feel his presence anytime he hits the ice. There's maybe one game in which he just disappeared, but one game in 8 games, I feel like that's amazing for a rookie. And with those 6 assists, I think either tied or at least second in the NHL for points among rookies. I think the only other one would be Luke Hughes, if I'm not mistaken. So he's up there, right? He's just been absolutely impressive. Yes, you're right. He's got to get that first goal, and it was bound to happen. I was hoping it was going to be, tonight against the Blackhawks, but again, I'll still take the assists. I feel like what he needs to work on mainly, Jack, is he's got to focus on taking the shot himself rather than passing. I feel like his main priority these first few games has been passing the puck. He's great at that. He's got no issue with that. He's just got to take the shot sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes it's tough for those young players to figure out that blend of trusting their own instincts or trying to make the fancy play and finding that middle ground and just realizing that making the simple play is the one they need to wind up doing. But I also wanted to know, what have the Coyotes done with Logan Cooley so far this year in terms of putting him in the lineup? Where have the spots that he's been in? Has he been in one consistent spot, or have they moved him around at all?
I feel like he's consistently, at least in terms of minutes, getting at least second line center minutes, which is around where I think he deserves. I think he's eventually going to get first line. But right now, Barrett Hayton's commanding that. I feel like you just don't want to mess with that line of Hayton, Keller, and Schmaltz. I feel like they work too perfectly. But up until, I believe, when Jason Zucker was injured last week for the Coyotes, Zucker and Cooley, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, Kerfoot on the other wing. That line looked pretty good. Every time they hit the ice, it's it seemed like they were comfortable with each other. But I feel like that's, Cooley's just kind of sticking around comfortable up there, and and it shows.
And 6 points, by the way, is tied with Connor Bedard as well, who got his 6th point with a goal this evening. I feel like this has kind of been 2 different starts to these rookie seasons for these two players, because Cooley is the one who's still looking for that first NHL goal, whereas Connor Bedard has been able to call his own number, but hasn't gotten a lot of help in terms of setting up plays thus far. And it's kind of been a little bit of a polar opposite start, where the Blackhawks are still figuring out how to build around him properly with what they have right now. And it's something that they addressed in the summer, but they're still working on it at this point in time. Do you feel like Logan Cooley is eventually going to get that opportunity with Nick Schmaltz and Clayton Keller? Do you feel like that's inevitable, or do you think there's more benefit to kind of letting him figuring it out on another line and trying to create more depth in the lineup?
I feel like it's a bit of both of those, because I feel like he's going to get more comfortable with what he's at right now, but he will get that opportunity with them at some point this season. It might not be next week. It might not even be next month, but it's probably maybe like come All-Star break. It's like, all right, you seem really comfortable where you are. Let's try you with the top dogs and see see how lethal this can get. I mean, we've seen we've seen how great he can be. If you saw anything of what he did during a preseason, and yes, you can take preseason with a grain of salt, but in the game in Melbourne, Australia, his spinorama, jumping shot, like it's shown he's able to.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll just have to see.
Yeah, the talent absolutely speaks for itself, and it's fun having these two special talents meeting up for the first time. I wish it was a more competitive game, Robyn, but I do feel like these are going to be battles that we're going to enjoy watching for a long, long time.
Oh, I have a feeling that the Logan Cooley versus Connor Bedard is going to be it could very well be like the next like McDavid versus Matthews or Obi versus Crosby, kind of like, everyone wants to watch those kind of games.
I know, and it's kind of cool that look at our two teams. Look how far they've come, and to think that there is that promising of a future where other folks might be watching our two teams go head to head for a long time is certainly a special air to be in.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing, especially this year, right? I feel like the Calder Trophy watch, I feel like everyone's gonna be focusing on that. Like, I know a lot. I know people who listen to my show all the time know that I'm gonna try to advocate for Logan Cooley to get it so much, but like, I mean, I'm gonna be honest. It's for this season. It is Bedard's to take. Like, I feel like he's got the best odds, at least at this point. I think if FanDuel had him at the only person who had like minus odds, like he was favored like by a decent amount. I feel like it is his to take. He's got to keep on that trajectory.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I do think it's probably, yes, it is still his to lose, but I think it could be closer than people expect, just because I do have concerns about the Blackhawks supporting cast around him, especially if, and knock on wood, I hope this isn't the case, but Taylor Hall's missed some time here in the early going. It's only a week-to-week injury, but it's pretty clear right now without Taylor Hall, it just doesn't seem like they have enough around him to consistently be having him produce, hence only 2 assists through the first 9 games of the regular season for Connor Bedard. I fully trust his goal scoring. That's always been the ability that I think was going to translate the easiest for him so far. With just the release that he has, it's special. I mean, the goal that he had tonight, it was on his stick and off of his stick in a hurry. And that's not going to be a worry, but I do wonder how many points he is truly going to rack up in terms of just like the assist, because that's where I think he's going to struggle.
And I do feel though that does still kind of like take a look into the value that, both these players add to other respective teams, right? Like Connor Bedard doesn't have as much of the support as you're talking about. Like, Taylor Hall is injured right now, and but regardless, I feel like, and it shows that he's still excelling otherwise. Logan Cooley, on the other hand, has a team that's with a different stage of their rebuild, and they're coming out and they're looking pretty darn hot. And he's just becoming, it's just becoming a product of that. So I think that's kind of what's helping Cooley in so many different ways versus Bedard. And I feel like that's why it shows the value for Bedard a little bit more. But I feel like it's still going to be one hell of a fight. I feel like, because I think even going back to the odds too, I think FanDuel before the season started had Logan Cooley at like plus 1,500 or something like that. And then I think even Luke Hughes had better odds than Logan Cooley, and all of a sudden Cooley moved up in the odds after week 2 or something like that.
Yeah, but the Bedard odds weren't really bettable in my opinion, and I saw a lot of people jumping on the Logan Cooley train, and I think that was the bet that made the most sense. So folks that did back it got to feel pretty good through the early going at least.
Oh, but you got to. And it's, again, if you're a better, that you pick at the value picks, like who's going to end up, potentially make you the most money out of what has at least a decent chance of happening.
Correct.
Anything else we should touch on before we close things off on here? I feel like we've went through a decent amount.
When's Logan Cooley? When's that first tuck coming? You got a prediction? What game is it?
Oh God. Let me see. Oh, you know what's going to be? So
Does he have a birthday coming up or something? Is there a special day ahead?
I don't know about that, but you know what? I'm going to predict the next one is going to be against the Seattle Kraken when Matty Beniers comes to town.
Oh, I would like that. I like that prediction, Robyn.
Again, it's like it's going to be against one of the top young players. It's going to be one of those fun battles.
That would be a good one to get it in. I hope it happens for you.
Awesome. Well, Jack, appreciate you coming on this crossover episode. Where can my listeners and your listeners find you and your work?
Yes, absolutely. You can check out the Locked On Blackhawks podcast for free wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. You can go and find the show's Twitter X account. Whatever it's called these days. Wild times we live in, Robyn. You can go and follow that at capital L, capital O _ Blackhawks. Or if you want to check out my personal, you can find that at Jack Bushman 2.
Awesome. And for the Locked On Coyotes podcast, you can also find us wherever you get your podcast. That includes YouTube, the Sirius XM radio app, also ad-free on Amazon Music. That's a really great place to listen to if you would like to listen without ads. On social media, we're on X at LO_Coyotes. I'm personally at Robyn _Leano. If you want to follow my co-host, you can find him. He's actually not on X. He deleted his X profile over the weekend. You can find him on Threads, though. He's at AZ_sports_guy. I'm still going to be so upset with them having that many underscores, but it's okay.
It happens.
Anyways, thanks again, everyone, for listening to today's episode. We'll see you guys next time.